In Module 29, we're introduced to factors other than reinforcement or the association between two stimuli that can influence learning. So we're going to walk you through today a section of Module 29.2 that tries to make the case for motivation being a cognitive factor that can influence learning. What's important about this is that Skinner believed that reinforcement was necessary for learning in terms of operating conditioning, right? So reinforcement was a necessary condition for learning to take place, for acquisition to take place. Research on motivation showed that reinforcement can sometimes undermine learning. So this is pretty important. When dealing with motivation, we're going to be dealing with two ideas of motivation. One is extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So should be able to define both those terms. So with intrinsic motivation, I want you to move beyond just it's driven by internal rewards. I want you to move to a deeper kind of definition, and that's where the motivation to engage or the desire. So you can use desire when defining motivation, if you don't want to use the word again, is when you have a desire to engage in a behavior for the sake of the behavior, because that behavior is naturally satisfying to you regardless if you are reinforced for it or not. So for instance, I really like reading. And reading is not simply reinforcing to me because my wife gives me a cookie every time I finish a book. There is something I find innately satisfying about learning new things. Extrinsic, I can't even speak here, motivation is where external factors are guiding the motivation. Right, so it's a desire to perform a behavior because you might get the cookie, or because maybe you don't want to have a late penalty or fail a class, status. All of these things are external factors that drive us. So I'm going to read not because I'm interested in geology, but because I want to get a degree to make money, etc. Okay, so those are the two different types of motivations. When it comes to the world of education, we're trying to get students to have more of an intrinsic motivation. The learning seems to last longer and be more durable. Okay, so some of the really cool studies connected to this term that I really want you to know, it's in italics on page 298, I believe, is the overjustification effect. I don't think Myers adds effect, but I'll give you an example before we give you a more textbook definition. So children naturally like to play with toys. That's something that most children do, not all, right? But most children like to do. And what they started doing were interesting studies especially with children, where they would reward children for doing things that children like to do, draw pictures and play with toys. And what they found was the motivation for engaging in that behavior actually decreased. So we're seeing, remember, reinforcement is always supposed to increase a behavior. So it decreased a behavior. This phenomenon is called the overjustification effect. So here's the overjustification effect in the blue here. So I want you to make sure you copy that down and understand that term. And here are some of the key points in which research on motivation, which is a cognitive factor, actually seem to undermine some of the Skinnerian principles.